morning, grandmother.
Good morning, Kathleen, to you and all my friends at Lockett Meadow, two and four-legged.
We are going to chew the cud for a little while about some interesting stuff because grandmother is, hang on, I'm just going to go right to this. Grandmother Nancy Andry, who is a delightful love of a person, and I could listen to her talk all day. She is of Algonquin and French heritage and has followed the Red Road since childhood. I'm taking this right from a bio online, but it's so beautiful. Seeking out elders willing to teach, her first two mentors were Lakota, one an author, one a medicine man. And how do we say this? Ojibwa?
Ojibwe,
Ojibwe, medicine woman. Then it's Micmac, right?
yes.
Mother later adopted her. Community elders gave her permission to pour lodges since 1991. She served as a facilitator for Native Women's Circle in federal prison for 17 years. A sun dancer and a sacred pipe carrier, she is acknowledged as an elder and a grandmother in her communities in Canada, where she was given instruction to bring out and share certain teachings. She's a well known storyteller, sharing legends from many different nations in schools, health facilities, and powwow circuit. She was a staff member of the Joined Nations of Connecticut, a youth organization for those of Native heritage. And she's given talks everywhere. She's also a horse person, so we're tight. We can talk horses all day. One of the things that I really want to talk about with you today, because what we're trying to do is really expand the way people think about animals as part of our little darn it channel here. Um, and you, as a Native American, have a completely different viewpoint of how the industrialized American and most of the rest of the industrialized world sees animals. Animals can be so easily separated out as non spiritual beings because it's so much easier to do terrible things to them that way and make a lot of money at their expense. Now, natives see things very differently. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the indigenous people of North America, which encompasses, all of US, Canada, Arctic region, really down into the Mexican border, that we believe that everything has a spirit. The plants have a spirit, the animals have a spirit, the the water has memory. So when Shamando, the creator, made the world, he gave everything a spirit. And that's extremely hard concept for Western thinking people to think of. And also the fact that many native societies, not all, but many, particularly along the eastern seaboard where we live, were matriarchal societies. They were not patriarchal societies, which those of our ancestors, and I walk with my feet in both worlds, they were predominantly patriarchal societies, which had burned like the wise women at the stake, the women who knew plants and how to deal with the animals. We also believe that at one point in time, when we totally lived on the land and were so connected to the land that we could communicate with the animals the same way. And I know you have this gift. You can do this. There, for the general population, there are very few people that can talk to the animals and have them respond back to you. And so the concept of the animals as spirits themselves, of having spirits, I don't want to go to a place when I leave here where there are no animals.
No kidding.
So we believe our animals can cross and we'll be with them again. And the animals have such wisdom because we were given 7 grandfather teachings, which were to be the ethics, the code of ethics for us. And of course, the plants, the animals, the seasons, they don't forget their original instructions. Only two-leggeds do that because Creator gave us free will.
Right.
And sometimes, ego and jealousy and all these things, whereas all these other beings that Shamando created, they know their place, they know what they have to do, they know, they accept. Acceptance is a huge thing. And so when a native person takes an animal for food, I'll just give you two small examples of that. There's an agreement with certain animals, like the buffalo, that saw the people starving and languishing and offered to be the sustenance for the plains people. And not one single thing on a buffalo is ever wasted.
Mhm.
But there's a reverence for that life that's being taken. And like Apache hunters, when they take an animal, before they do what they have to do, they will put a red cloth over the animal's eyes. They will put cornmeal at their muzzle so that they have food for their journey back into the spirit world.
Right.
And there's gratitude for what that animal has done so that you can live. So that's a totally different concept when we see factory farming, which is more hideous than, I can't even stand the thought of factory farming and what's done to the chickens, to the pigs. And if you've ever personally known a pig like we do at Lockett's Meadow, they are intelligent,
That's what
loving,
I think.
wonderful beings. And so the native perspective in that is totally different. I remember being at a gathering like maybe 8 years ago when there were like 300 people to feed, and the young men had brought in a moose. And the moose was reverently put out, and all the women, especially us grandmothers, took our tobacco and we prayed with that moose for that moose's journey back to her ancestors would be swift, and the gratitude that we would all be fed and that the elders would even go home with some meat after the gathering. So there's a reverence even when you cook the food. There's a reverence. I made bison chili the other night, and I sang a song. Tatanka oyate wana nubedo hey hey. So I was thanking that bison for giving me this nourishing 100% fat free, no steroids, no anything, um, the way we were intended if we were going to be meat eaters to do it. And I thanked it. And when we put out our food, we put some of everything on a plate to acknowledge our ancestors and the way that they looked towards animals, because to us, animals have spirits.
The way society sees animals now, we assign, we all worry that our dogs will go to heaven. Um, and the way society sees things now, we see, okay, our dogs and our cats and our horses must be in heaven with us, but they exempt the pigs and the chickens and the cattle because they don't want to think about them being spiritual animals being put through the containment and the abuses of the factory farming system. Um, you can't differentiate that, right? The all animals
No,
have
for
spirit.
us, we know that when we go to the spirit world, we'll probably meet the bison or the deer or the moose, and we'll be able to personally thank their spirits for having nourished us. And we believe that they have as much right to be in that spirit world as we do. So
Right.
it's that reverence for all living things. I mean, I was once stung by a yellow jacket and almost died. And when I first moved where I am now, there were yellow jackets everywhere.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I understand that you're getting things you need here and you're welcome here, but please don't, I won't swat at you or anything, but please don't hurt me because you could make me go to the spirit world. And sometimes they light on me, and I was a little nervous about that, but nobody ever stung me.
Right. If you
So
have
we've
conversation,
forgotten how to talk to these animals and respect that they're living beings, just like us, that they feel pain, you know. Um, Look at some animals, how they grieve when their mate is lost, and some animals mate for life.
yep, I've seen it here
Yeah.
often. It's a, oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking when they lose their best friends. All right, so one of the things we want to do today is have you tell us a story. And this way people can understand exactly what kind of reverence and importance you put to animals. Um, so we talked a little bit about the story of Bear and Otter, which I love.
Well, there was a belief among our people that even the animals had their own councils, and of course the bear, which is such a magnificent animal and a powerful animal. However, bears are not naturally aggressive unless it's over food or mating, or they're threatened. If you corner a bear, he's going to fight back. But among the people, among the animal people, the bear was the great chief, and he decided who could live in which pond and which tree hollow, and so that there'd be balance and harmony among the animals.
Right,
And he was respected by all the other animals. Now, it doesn't mean that if a bear gets hungry, he won't eat like a small little mole or something, because he will if he's hungry. And of course, we know they love salmon, they love fish, and strangely enough, I've seen photographs of men fishing in Alaska with the bears right next to them. And as long as nobody invades their space, they're fine.
right.
So at one point, the bear chief was taking care of all the animals. He sort of settled disputes and what have you. And little Otter, who was very playful, but she had a terrible habit of teasing. Oh, raccoon, why do you have that funny mask and you've got those stripes? That's so funny. And Raccoon would say, but that's the way Jamando made me. And she'd go, oh, look at you, opossum. You have no hair on your tail at all. And a possum would look, and there's a reason a possum has no hair on his tail. So she was starting to make the other animals doubt why Creator had made them the way. And so Bear called her over. He said, Otter, come here. He said, don't like what you're doing. I know you're not mean. You don't want to hurt anybody, but you're making the other animals feel bad about the way the Creator made them. And you're making them laugh at each other, which has never happened before. This is not a good thing. You need to stop doing this. Oh, all right, said Otter. But Otter was stubborn, and she thought it was fun to tease the other animals. Oh, Fox, look at you. You've got black feet and a tip on your tail. And she didn't realize that the great bear chief was hiding behind some great trees and listening and watching every single thing that she was doing. And he came out behind the tree and went whop. He whopped her good with his paw, and she went. And he said, Otter, I warned you not to do this. He said, so now what's going to happen is that you're going to slide in and out of the mud and the water, and you're going to roll over, and all the other animals and the two-leggeds are going to laugh at your antics. But if you do this with grace and good humor, I will let you be in charge of all the women's medicines. And from that day to this, you'll see many of us who carry otter bags and keep our sacred items in those otter bags. So you see, people say to me, oh, these are children's stories. Well, we're all Creator's children.
Right.
And there's a lesson in every single one of these stories.
Yep.
and you'll notice that there was order. There was an order of things that was accepted. Wolf pack is a very good example of that because you always have the alpha wolves. But when a wolf pack travels, the alpha wolves will stay on the outside, and the elderly wolves and the youngest wolves are always put in the middle of that pack. They're protected. They still remember to take care of their young and their elders, something that the humans right now really need to remember.
You talking about there being this lovely order of everybody being in their place and doing their jobs in the world of animals. What is the position of humans in that world, according to Native tradition?
We were given 7 grandfather teachings: honesty, humility, generosity, compassion, and to keep things in balance and never to take. We were given everything we would need. We've probably killed off so many medicine plants, and we're still using medicine plants. Um, so we've disturbed that balance
Yeah.
because everybody wants a big honking house and they want 3 cars in the garage and they want to get on airplanes and travel, all over. And, there's nothing wrong with wanting a good roof over your head. It's really nice to have flush plumbing and running water,
Right.
um, you know, but we've gotten so out of balance on what we really need. We've disrespected the land and the animal because of what we've done with the land and agriculture and farming. The backbone of this country was the family farm. We were unique in that we could feed our own people, and that balance is totally disturbed, and the disrespect for the soil and farming in a responsible way, except for those organic farmers that are out there, and people who compost and do things like that. Where I live, I'm not allowed to compost.
Right.
um I wish that I could, but I have many friends who do. And and even, like, I had a friend in Massachusetts who had a horse rescue, and even the manure was recycled, and there was a process where that could be done very quickly and turned into nourishment for the soil.
Right.
And so we have those things at our disposal, but it's all about the money. Native American perspective is different. Everything is about community.
Right.
It's not about the individual. So the Western, we're taught you have to get a good education, you have to climb over whoever you need to climb over to get to the top percent of your company or whatever you're doing.
Right.
And then you have to acquire all this stuff to show people how wealthy you are. Whereas the indigenous view of this, and this is true of indigenous people all over the globe, in South America, Australia, New Zealand. I've had the huge honor to be in contact and be at gatherings with people from indigenous people from all over the world, and their community has to come first.
Right.
um, so even during this pandemic, I talked to my native sister who's Cheyenne Arapaho and lives on the Southern Cheyenne Reservation in Oklahoma. And, she's older. She's not as old as me, but they've made sure that groceries are put on her porch. They've made sure that has somebody has come and chopped firewood and put it there for her wood stove,
Right.
so that she's safe. Because this is what happens with the elders. The young people go, okay, we got to go over to Grandpa so and so's and make sure he has wood, make sure he has food. But I see it when I have the honor to go home to places like Kitsi and Malyut and Wachot and
Mhm.
Pessimet, where I was walking across the field coming from our lodge, and this young little girl, she's probably 10, Grandma, don't walk by yourself, because she was afraid I would fall. They all know I don't see well,
Right.
but this little child, I didn't even know her family, made sure that I didn't walk across that field
Wow.
by myself,
So
because
what
you
we
take care of your elders.
right. So what we've lost in, I mean, in translation and every place else, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but there's the empathy that we should have for each other and for animals, and make sure that we keep suffering to an absolute minimum, and that we're looking out for each other, and we're looking out for animals, not just our dogs and our cats and our ponies, but for all animals, and making sure that they're not suffering the way they do suffer horrifically in factory farms and other neglect and abuse situations. We're missing this empathy factor, that somewhere when we became so industrialized and so dependent on money, and it's completely changed the way we take care of our planet, ourselves, our friends, our family, our animals.
We have become really disenfranchised. And, years ago, I remember as a little girl, I could walk to all my aunts' houses. And we lived in a suburb of New York City. And I had both of my grandmothers and my one grandfather that I could communicate. And you see, all those family ties and connections have been so scattered because people move around a lot. A lot of people don't have the wisdom from their grandparents and their aunties and their uncles, and they don't have all their cousins. All my cousins were boys. So, yeah, I learned to climb trees and stuff, because they sure as heck weren't going to play Tea Party with me, but they looked out for me too.
Yep.
And so I think all of us in the past experienced, I hated holidays because I was the dish doer.
Oh, yes. Yes, I was one of the older daughters, that me and my cousin Susan, and we had to wash the dishes. 20 something people in a house after a huge meal, and it was
Exactly. And so finally, when I was, I think, about 13, and I had graduated to also doing the pots and pans, all
uh,
the boy cousins were sitting out there, and I walked out and said, "Hey, you guys can learn how to dry a dish." And my aunts backed me up. They said, "Yeah, they can. Get out in the kitchen."
mhm.
So at least I felt then I was getting, some support,
A
and,
little respect, a little bit.
at least some,
Right.
and it wasn't cruelty on my aunties and my moms and my grandmothers. It was that you learned to do this and you learned to do it properly.
Right.
I think when I was about 5, my grandmother taught me how to dust end tables. And we don't do that with our children. We give them all these, devices and what have you. And it's not okay, at age 5. And then they get to college and they're not prepared. They don't know how to scramble an egg. They don't know how to do
I'll
anything.
tell you, here on Lockett's Meadow, these grandchildren are learning to do it.
I know that, and I've seen that, and that's wonderful. They don't know what a wonderful gift they're really receiving.
Sometimes I think that, well, especially, my grandson Iggy, he says he understands how lucky he is. He's 6 years old,
I
and
think he
he's been
does, though.
doing it.
He's an old
Absolutely.
soul in a young body.
Very old soul, very
Yeah,
old soul.
and,
He's
and lots of, and you know what? I did 4-H for 22 years, so I had kids from 7 on up to the teens, right? Kids are like animals. Animals love routine. They love structure.
yeah.
And children are the same. They like a routine, they like structure,
Mhm.
if it's done in a kind and loving manner.
Right. Right.
And screaming at your kids is not a kind and loving manner.
Well, I have to
And
admit
there's another
that,
difference with
but
Native people. Native people will, if their children do something wrong, come here. I need to talk to you. Sit down. You threw a rock at that frog. Why'd you do that?
Hmm.
Well, I don't know. I wanted to see him jump. No. How would you like it if you were sitting there and somebody threw a rock at you to see you jump? Would you like that? Well, no. Well, do you think it was right to make the frog jump like that? That frog was maybe eating his breakfast or dinner. That wasn't a correct thing to do. You need to think about these things before you do them. So there's the difference. And what the heck are you doing? You know, it's
Right.
totally different approach to child raising. And yeah, okay, you can help stack the firewood, or you can, you can go in and ask grandma if she needs help taking the ashes out of the stove or whatever.
Mhm.
Children don't resent that. They like it.
Yeah, now I know they like to help. 1 second. Horatio, you have to do that.
The parrot wants something. I love him. He's a character.
And the other one is Solly. He's acting up as well. Uh, all right.
I think it's appropriate that we have animal sounds at the background.
You think so? Well, I want to thank you so much for having this conversation. We're going to do this again. We're going to tell a few more stories. I think it's really important for people to remember that our relationship with animals in, you know, many generations past was a very different thing. But it not only was a really more of a reciprocal relationship with the animals, we were also, it helped us be more empathic with each other. And I'm going to be interviewing somebody from, next week from a group called Desmond's Army. And one of the things they talk about is how people, or children in particular, who abuse animals usually end up abusing humans as well. It translates
Yes,
so easily.
that's true.
So anyway, it's a very interesting philosophy that I think we need to move back towards, and I think we are. I think we are, and I think that people like you, grandmother, talking about the teachings of the Native Americans is a very important step. So we're going to do more, and we're going to do the story of the horse one day very soon. We're going to get that posted because it's just delightful. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
No, my honor, my ancestors, I think would be happy. My instructions from my peers and my elders who taught me were to take the teachings out as long as people were respectful of them. And I certainly know there's no problem there at Lockett's Meadow.
I will be in touch soon, and we will do some more. Mwah.
All right. Love to everybody at Lockett's Meadow. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, love you. Bye bye.
Bye.